Right then. Welcome to Venues a Day, Venue Stories. Loads of you have probably seen this before. If you haven't, I should explain just a little bit about how it will work. We've been allotted 80 minutes, I think, for this. So that's just short of the length of a football match. It's twice as long as it takes to write your mini budget on a Commons beer mat. It's actually half the time it takes to fill in an East Midlands delay repay form, and it's also exactly the amount of time it takes Mark David to walk the dog, write 14 tweets, 8 Facebook posts, an angry letter to the DCMS committee, and an even angrier letter to his local shop demanding to know where his latest issue of Classic Rock magazine is. Uriah Heber in it this week. So we have 7 representatives of 7 different venues. So I make that roughly 8 or 9 minutes of their stories each. Gives us about 15 minutes at the end to pick up on any points, any issues raised that we think we need to dig a little bit deeper into. Obviously there'll be some very individual stories. I imagine there'll be some common themes which I hope reflect some of the things that concern you at the moment. I guess we'll be talking about community, diversification of spaces. We should probably also talk about, obviously, ticket demand, mental health maybe, general running costs, that kind of thing. Let's see where we get to. Let's welcome our first guest. Put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen. Owner of the Brudenell Social Club, Nathan Clark. So, just very briefly, the story of the venue, because it was a working men's club, was it? A sort of social club.
Yeah, an older social club in the student area of Leeds, situated between a couple of universities. That essentially, when working class culture moves out and students move in, you have to diversify and look at the audience around you and build something that is tuned to the audience that's there, and look at the demographics that are there, and that's how we've kind of built it over the last 20 years or more.
Did you have a clear vision of what you wanted it to be when you arrived and took it over, or was it a bit trial and error?
It wasn't a takeover. My parents ran it first. I think at the time I came back doing a bit of a business masters, and I did an assessment of like a few different simple assessments, pestle analysis, and looked at the political and a regional analysis, and looked at who our neighbours were, and thought, where can we as a venue, and what do we have here that can be best suiting for the demographic and people that we want to work with. So things like not doing a club night, to respect the neighbours, to help the long-term kind of assessments and impacts of noise, and just thinking, where can we best grow? How can we best work with our neighbours, but also the artists that want to come here, and kind of fine-tune our venue along the way, and how we can grow it, and what would our strengths be to make it a great place for everyone to come, whether it be staff to work there, audience that are coming, or the artists that come with it.
And you opened up a second venue, essentially. You had some lands next to the original Brudenell. You purpose-built a new venue specifically with the audience in mind.
Yeah, it was a long time coming, that, and I think you've got to look at it as, it was possibly one of the only privately built venues of a new build on a land that has happened in the UK for decades. And for us, it wasn't just giving the venue more security, it gave us a chance to have more programming, more options to come to the venue and play a different room in the venue, and give the same quality and experience that we want to give an artist coming to our venue, but play in a different room, and a pathway through that means that we can also ensure production, the relationship that we build with artists going through, and it was a much needed space, I think, in the city that we assessed and thought, how can we do this for the community as well, and how can we make it multi-purpose that fits, whether it is all a flat ground level loading, kids and younger audiences and toddlers kind of made for music events. So it kind of give us an opportunity to have a blank canvas but fit as much as we could into something but not replicate what we already had.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, because it's a bloody lovely room for the audience as well, the sound and everything. Have you noticed a change in the audience's expectations of what they want out of a live gig, what they expect their experience of a live gig to be? Has it changed at all?
In ways, but I always go back to the point of, I look down here and I look at the monitors there, D&B quality system, and if you can put a quality system on stage for the artist to hear monitoring wise, and you can get a great PA and pay the engineers fairly that you want to keep for the long term, that people want to come and work with, then you start to have something that will start to reflect and give a great experience for the artist that then I think has an osmosis into the audience out there. And you start to build that relationship, and if you can do that, that's where I think you start to win the community and build something.
What about, so you open up the second, so you've got two rooms potentially going at the same time. Where are we post-COVID in terms of ticket demand? Because obviously there's lots of factors at the moment. Are you noticing that it's harder selling tickets, or people are...
Yeah, and well, in some ways, yes. I think that we were quite strategic when COVID hit, and we wanted to maintain. I think we looked at it in a maintaining a relationship with the audience, maintaining social media channels, because I know that there were various things that just shut down and went quiet, and I think that maintaining them means the algorithms in social media keep you connected, but then also harvesting social data and being able to connect in those ways means that you can get directly to the person you want and how you want it is a lot more kind of an intelligent way of maintaining the audience with segmenting and kind of targeted marketing, not just relying on general Facebook ads. And I think that that's what we did well, and that's paying off results generally. But you're not going to change the anomaly of, and I think this is a wider discussion about not just ticket sales, but the influence of social media. And you'll know that the funnel has opened much wider, and how the audience is of listening to a couple of radio stations now with digital radio and the access to online demand, and any artist can go online and put it in several platforms. So the old kind of direction of getting your information of music, fashion, art that would come through Melody Maker or an NME is now much wider scope, and I think you have to understand that with that becomes a much more saturated marketplace and a lot more choice, and therefore there is that demand, and when a new artist is launching, it's about how can you work with them to get to the audience that probably perceives best for them, and build it from there. But you are seeing undoubtedly the crunch of disposable income and other factors, or choosing, and at the other end of the scale, large shows putting up their ticket prices, and the conversation that we've all had about the value of music at our level and what we should be charging within the ticket price, and we'll go on to the discussions later about the economy with everyone else, but is the size of what we have income-wise big enough relative, and we need to change the public perception of the value of live music to the wider public, because the price that people pay going to the cinema, or used to pay pre-pandemic, now they can't get them into the cinema obviously, but I think that there's a massive shift that we need to do, and the value of artistic art form and the effort and the crew and the time and everything that goes into making a quality production, and how we as GMVs put out there. And I think that's one of the next challenges that we need to do, because, you know, what I've got to say about MVT was one of the greatest hurdles that I think we can all do, and that Mark and Bev took forward in the first place, was changing the narrative of who we are and what we do, that we're not the toilet circuit, you know, and them taking them strides in the early years of MVT has changed the public perception of who we are. Now it's about changing the value of what we add to it, and I think that is going to be where the next kind of few years is, and getting the public to realise and invest in us with their pound, you know.
I think that's summed up quite a lot of the things probably which we will touch on later on. I guess the only thing I'd add to that in your case is how important you've been to the actual scene in Leeds. I always say, you know, if a town's got a venue, bands will form, artists will form, you know, artists will start playing, bands will form around it. I mean, you've been spectacularly successful and played a role in so many bands coming through Leeds to various levels, including Yard Act, who are up for a Mercury tonight.
Yeah, but I look around the room and I see people, and the discussion last week, I said the word lifers, right? And I think I see a load of people that I know and are friends with in this room that are lifers in the music industry, and they're not doing it to make, and I think this is one of the biggest differences between when I own my venue. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not looking to make a profit for a shareholder.
Well, you see, this is I suppose, yeah, so my continued point is, wouldn't it be great, though, if the people who benefit, not the bands, because we all do it, we all love to see a band that we like become successful, but the people who later benefit down the line from that band's success are aware of how much work and effort and money you, at the bottom, have put in by helping them on their way.
And one of the things that backs up what I think Mark and Bev and everyone are trying to do with the Own Our Venues, when you own your venue and you have that freedom to program, and I went on quite a mission, I can't remember how many years ago I started promoting and really taking an interest in the bands and thinking, this is what I want to do, I can take a risk personally. And when you start to do that, you can start to put the bedrock in place, change the culture of the scene in your town, and, you know, invite bands you want to do on a quiet night, or not to fill the gap, or you can afford to turn down a certain tribute act to put on something you genuinely love, right? And I think that's the bit that we can do, because the passion's there to develop people and scenes, and not only just artists, but it is the crew, my friends that I go to the football with are tour managers everywhere, or wherever it, you know, videographers that I know that came through working behind the bar are now working for ESPN or someone like that around the world.
Yeah.
And I think that they're the real achievements that I look back on in my work, is the development in people's lives, and the culture, like I say, the cultural importance of the venues that we do isn't just down to the artists and where they go, it's the nature and changing of what fashion we do. You know, I think there's a much wider scope of where we need to change the cultural importance of who we are, because if you look at things like the fashion that came from the grunge movement, right? That came from a band in a small venue somewhere, and you look at how Nirvana changed with baggy t-shirts. If you look at the goth scene and how that changed public, and how fashion brands brought off that came from a small venue somewhere playing, you know, or post-punk or anything else. And I think that those connected organisations in art, music and fashion need to realise that, and I keep using this analogy, that we're kind of the ones that spread the small seeds, and the oak tree over there grows from the work that we do. And at times, certainly right now, when the economy's squeezed and you've got the Chancellor reversing decisions on alcohol duty, and, you know, the rateable values have gone up, unless there is a recognition of the ecology, not just in music, but of brands, of the work that we do, and they water those seeds, how can we ever keep that oak tree going? And I think that's the importance. And when you look at how important it is to our national identity, who we are and what we put out, it's something that needs to be protected. And you know, our seeds are the future of creating the next, you know, cultural infrastructure, and we're every bit as important, and I consider my venue every bit as important, and everyone else's, as Westminster Palace. That's where I'd like to leave that.
Nathan Clark, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Nathan. Right, our next guest is a community leader, activist, landlady, historian and musician. She took the lease of the Old Abbey Tap House in Manchester with her bandmate Craig in 2016 on a budget of £2,000. Over the last 6 years, they've turned it into an award-winning social enterprise consisting of music venue, kitchen, community radio station, band rehearsal spaces. There's a team of 14 there now. To tell us more from the Old Abbey, Rochelle Everoa. You have to do the, excuse because I've never been there. I don't think I've ever been there. You have to do the little basic facts. Where is it? What's the setup? How big is it? Paint me a picture.
The Old Abbey Tap House is the last remaining pub of the Greenhays estate, and it's behind a university and between two council estates, kind of in Human Moss side, but actually it was the Greenhays area.
Right. So what were the circumstances that led you to take it over?
So I met my best friend Craig when I was 25, and we're both in bands. But when I moved to Manchester, I got told I wasn't punk enough to play on the punk scene in Manchester. So we decided to start our own scene, so we started putting on club nights, and we'd find unusual venues or spaces that weren't doing very well. And we found the pub, and we started helping out the owner, but he only opened it in lunchtimes. And then he gave us the upstairs room as our band practice room.
Right.
And then he told us he was giving up the pub, so we decided we would try and take on the pub. And that's what we did.
And when you took it over, what was your idea of what you were going to do with it then? Because it wasn't just going to be a pub.
So does anyone know the Magic Garden pub in London? It's an amazing pub,
right.
And it's got a big stretch tent outside, and it does loads of stacked events. So they do after-works drinks into gigs, into club nights, and that was a big inspiration for us. So the actual pub is tiny. It's a small Victorian pub, and we could fit 50 to 100 people inside, but not comfortably. But the outside, we've got this big, it's a cobbled road, and it's the leftover bit of the estate. So we got a big stretch tent, and we put a stage out there, and that allows us to have an extra 200 people. And we're both activists, so community was at the heart of what we do. And neither of us like to preach about politics, because that doesn't change anyone's opinion. So we just put into action everything we thought we should do. So it's a quite deprived area. I think the best work we did was in lockdown. There's loads of elderly people. They couldn't go to Asda. Asda had sold out, so we went and knocked on the doors, and we've been feeding people every Tuesday and sending out a 2-course meal. And we've got the same volunteers going, and we've been doing that for 2 years. And I think that's our strength, is that we really listen to the community, and we care about their stories, and we care about their heritage.
And you've got a community radio station.
Yes.
How does one start a community radio station? Where'd you get the kit from? How did you fund it?
So it was, we've got friends in Italy. So in the run-up to the lockdown, Craig was talking to our friends in Italy, and they were telling us how bad COVID was. So we organised a meeting with the councillors, and they had no idea what was going on. And literally the next day, lockdown got announced. So in the run-up to that, I wrote a manifesto of what we'd do. So it was a radio, tap house TV dinners, a newsletter, because a lot of the information was on Twitter, and if you're an elderly person, you don't really know what's going on. So we put leaflets together and told people what was happening, and the radio came out of that. There's no money in radio. It's a good thing that we do. Sorry, Steve. It's a really good thing that we do. And we've done a lot of podcasts and stuff like that. And at the moment, we're struggling to know if we could keep it going or not.
Yeah.
But it's been amazing, and I want to keep it going.
What's important to you as somebody who's, running what has become obviously the centre of this growing sort of community? Were you thinking, I just want a place where, I guess it's a safe space and somewhere where it very much feels like it's a place where everyone looks out for everyone else? Was that that's the environment that you were after?
I love the community there. It's really mixed. And it's got a really strong working class heritage as well, and people are really proud, and so much has happened in that area. So if anyone knows about the Pan-African movement, Denmark Road is near us, and there was so much activism and so much amazing stuff that came out of that. So Len Johnson is a famous boxer, but he wasn't allowed to fight for our country because he was black in 1953. So he came back to Manchester and became a bus driver and did loads and loads of activism. And some of the activism he did was overturning the colour bar at our pub. So remembering that heritage is really important. We're also near the Crescents, which was a crazy place in the 90s. So there was a lot of... it's described as slums, but if you talk to anyone who lived there at the time, they loved it. And there was a lot of freedom and there was space, so lots of interesting things happened. And there's still kind of remnants of that community there too, so we really tapped into that as well. Mm-hmm.
I know one of the other things that you were keen to talk about as well was just within the team and within the venue, the broader venue, that equality is a very key issue for you, and giving chances to people, anyone.
Yeah, so I actually have 3 jobs. One job is teaching science to children and getting more women into science. My other job is in community development, so I go out and talk to lots of hard-to-reach communities, and I love that. And it's got quite fashionable at the moment, but sometimes I go into communities and they might not instantly take to me, and it takes 2 or 3 years to build those relationships. So I've done 10 years of community work in Moss Side and Hume, and I've built real trust over those years. And everyone talks about equality and diversity, but me and my friend the other day, I'm semi-disabled, I went to this music panel. My friend was 9 months pregnant, I was on crutches. There was a panel about equality and diversity, but no one offered us any help or support. And I think that is making people feel comfortable and making people feel welcome when they come into your space is key. What you program, reaching out to different communities and asking for their opinions and what they want to see is really important. Not just a fucking panel, sorry. It really annoys me. Like, everyone talks about it, but stop talking, start doing.
How are you seeing the year ahead panning out?
I'm forever an optimist, but I took the CO2 gas order 2 weeks ago, and it had gone from $13.50 to $39.50 a bottle, and that powers all our beer lines. But it also is what the brewers use to make beer. And we've been working with this amazing brewery called Strange Times for 4 years. I don't think we would have survived without him, but he's thinking of packing it all in because he had no support over lockdown. And I don't know where I can make the money. So we're thinking about turning the pizza oven off because it uses so much electricity. And at the moment, I pay for everything. Luckily, we get funding, but basically the beer and the pizza and the food have to pay for everything, national insurance, PRS. If I had to put the price of the pints up to where it should be, it'd be £10 a pint and £20 a pizza, but we're in a really deprived area. So I'm already seeing people struggle. So we've got £3 pints, we do free food on Tuesdays. We're in a science park, so we have the business workers and the office workers, and we used to have the lecturers, but they all work from home now. So they might come in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so I've lost all my lunch trade.
The lazy bastards.
Yeah. And of course, if you're, the first thing you do if you're saving money is you stop eating out for lunch, don't you? And you stop going for after-works drinks. So we've had to do more and more club nights, which I don't mind, but I like to have the whole spectrum of events and stuff, and doing more club nights upsets the neighbours. And I had a really funny one the other day where one neighbour started kicking off about our noise, and then he put up posters everywhere, and then it actually united all the residents because of all the community work we've done. The residents love us, so I can get away with a bit of noise. And all the residents rang me to tell me that they've restarted the residents group, and they've been going around taking down the posters. And now the council's had more complaints about the posters than they have about the pub. So now it's all good with licensing, but that's been great.
That is brilliant. Michelle, thank you very much. Oh, just leave it there. As we'll bring on, who's next? Operations and Art Director at Corsica Studios. She's also the nominated Wellbeing Champion, not to mention being Director at the Good Night Out campaign, and an artist and musician, Alice Hoffman-Fuller.
Hello.
Hello. Tell us about Corsica Studios. I know it a little bit because it's just down the road from me, but for people who don't know, how long's it been open and what are you sort of chiefly known for?
Well, we've probably been open for, getting on for 20 years. So that's coming up soon. Ancient. Chiefly we're known for, we started as an art space to give a place for rehearsal and performance of creative and artistic practices. And then we realised that we couldn't actually fund that unless we did some more commercial events. So we started having more club weekends. And that's been really successful. We're mostly known for our sound system and like ACE programming. And you tend to find that people travel from across the world really to experience the sound, and particularly Room 2 has got a really good reputation. And then live, we put on all sorts of stuff. We've got a really eclectic program, so it could be anything from working men's club to, I don't know, all sorts of stuff.
So, anything? Do you think, as much as there's something about doing a very diverse range of stuff, in these days when there's lots of other choice, particularly in London, that specialising in certain things can build you a reputation that actually helps draw people in? The word of mouth reputation means that you're skipping all that problem of having to advertise, because people will tell someone else by reputation that this is a really good thing.
And I think that obviously longevity helps that, and the fact that we've been around for so long, and with a certain amount of reputation for what we do, means that yes, there is less having to actually attract audiences. They know what we provide already. That's not to say that it doesn't become difficult when obviously the way that you promote things is changing, the social media platforms are changing, the way that you actually try and attract customers is changing. But because we are long-standing and people kind of know that what we stand for already, then generally there is already a reasonable attendance for most things. What I would say at the moment, though, the biggest challenges come from the fact that people have less money to spend. So advance ticketing is less, and also bar spend is less. There's less disposable income. So you tend to find that, they might come out, but they'll come out last minute and they'll spend less. Yeah.
Also, you're in the Elephant and Castle, which is currently being almost rebuilt, almost in its entirety. How has that had any impacts? Because obviously there's a certain gentrification. I've seen the council estate got knocked down, brand new flats go up. Does it change the demographic, and is there any threat to your venue?
Well, that's a really difficult question. In terms of the demographic of people that actually come to the venue, I would say no. It's still pretty broad-ranging. But I would say that in terms of gentrification being a threat, absolutely. So development is happening within 3 meters of our back door, which means that obviously there's going to be the threat of sound complaints. And just at the moment, all that we're finding that is happening is constant noise of bulldozers, and obviously the people guys dropping off massive trucks full of concrete every day, constantly. But in terms of the
Does that mean you could make a noise complaint, a sort of preemptive noise complaint?
Yeah, if we made a noise at the same time that they do, it would be not a problem, because we do it in the night. It's obviously it's unacceptable. So without the shopping centre there, now we don't have a barrier to local kind of residential flats and stuff. That used to create a really good sound barrier. Now that's gone, it means that the sound travels much further, and you could find that you're getting a random complaint from an estate that is way across the roundabout. In terms of threat, yes, within the whole development, there are changes going for all of the businesses that are on our street. and including us, we feel that maybe we weren't taken into account early enough in the planning proposals. So yeah, there's a little bit of negotiation to go, really, to find out what our actual level of threat is.
When did you actually find out? Did you find out when the bulldozer turned up outside?
Not long before that. Basically, we found out when they decided that we probably ought to have an acoustic survey at some point. That was way, like probably a year or two down the line, when they'd already started to put in proposals and stuff.
So this is an ongoing thing.
It is ongoing. Yeah.
Right.
And because of the stage where we are in negotiations, we're at a point of real uncertainty. So there's not a great deal more information I can give at this point until we've actually been through more negotiations.
In the meantime, as we go forward, being one of many venues in London, I suppose it's back to the sort of, because I looked on your website and it really feels like you've built this identity for, certain types of nights and stuff. But would that give you the chance to maybe link up with other venues around South London to sort of pool resources to publicise events and to, like a miniature branch of the MVT or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of thing that we're looking into, really. And something that we've always been keen on is really forming connections with other venues and other promoters, particularly because just with the ecology side of things, in terms of bringing across international artists, wouldn't it be better if we kind of shared their costs, if we shared their flight, and so we booked across a few different venues instead of just ours? Obviously, like I say, that affects the ecology, but also for us, it's important to really draw from the pool of UK talent. Obviously, that helps because we've always had a focus on artist development generally anyway, and for us, there's an element of optimism that possibly the route forward out of a lot of these challenges is to invite and involve the audience at a much earlier stage in artists' careers. Rather than them buying tickets to see them in a stadium, why aren't audiences encouraged to come to artists' early gigs and be proud of the fact that they saw their first appearances? So we particularly with our in-house nights, Small Talk, it's wholly focused on UK artists, local artists, and making links with younger, more emerging promoters that maybe need a little bit of a break, and then hopefully we can develop the scene a little bit better with a more, a more community-based effort,
Yeah, and educating along the way.
This is it.
I think this is what one of the points sort of Nathan alluded to as well. I think it's important young musicians appreciate, what goes into putting on these nights, and the earlier they start their apprenticeship and understand what you do.
Yeah, absolutely, and not just musicians either. Because obviously if you've done it for as long as we have, and 20 years is quite a while, but also if we're talking about future-proofing what we do and some kind of succession, then we're not going to be able to do that forever. And we actually have a duty to inspire and teach the youth to know how to run venues, have an interest in running venues. And that is really important because we're not going to be around to do that forever, so we need to draw from the pool to help actually, sustain the sector that we're in as well, leave a legacy.
That's a very good point. Thank you very much. Alice.
Thank you.
Alice Hoffman-Fuller, thank you. Our next guest has, some links to London. Founder of 2 music venues now, the Night Owl in Birmingham and London, Arith Lianagay. Please tell me it's called the Night Owl, named after that place in LA Confidential, where they all get bumped off.
No, sadly not. It's when we started in Birmingham, we focused on Northern Soul. So anyone knows a Northern Soul, the Night Owl is a record of Bobby Paris. It's a classic record, so that's where we come from.
Tell us about what you were doing beforehand. What's your past form? Where did you come from?
Right, so I'm not steeped in the music industry, well, certainly not 8 years ago. I've got a background in construction, corporate construction, worked for big companies, that sort of thing. And I was actually looking for almost like a Homes on the Hammer kind of deal, just to develop a building and sell it off and whatever. And I just happened to find a business plan about starting a Northern Soul nightclub, the first dedicated Northern Soul club in the UK. So I kind of was intrigued by that, and I kind of then got the bug and realised that sort of music attracts an older crowd, and there's plenty of bars, live music venues, clubs that focus on sort of the younger sector, but this was something really interesting. So I got kind of pulled into that as what was initially an investor, but before I knew it was recruiting, setting up the bar, and really got the bug for live music, and I really got quite a buzz out of bringing employment and just giving opportunities to people that perhaps wouldn't have that. So about 3-4 years ago, I thought, what, this is more than just a pastime. This could be something I can do full time. So rather bravely or foolhardy, I don't know, but we decided to expand from Birmingham down into London, and we were going to open in 2019, 2020, but something happened in the middle, and we managed to get open just last July in Finsbury Park. So we've got 2 venues now, which is
And how hard? I mean, obviously you take over the Birmingham venue is already running comfortably. How hard though was it establishing, bringing something and plonking in this new place in Finsbury Park and saying, "Come on, everybody, this is a great night out"?
Yes, it's quite a challenge. I thought, every city in the UK could have a night out, because we focused on, we started with Northern Soul, we broadened it out to Motown, retro, mod, ska, reggae, Britpop, pretty much anything. And I thought, actually, this could work anywhere. But yeah, we had the challenge of opening just after COVID last year. And London is a much tougher market than outside of any other parts of the UK. And we're one of many venues almost reopening at the same time. So it's been tough. But what we have done in terms of sort of links, connection between the 2 venues, is we often have bands that will play in Birmingham that kind of established a bit in Birmingham. We give them a chance and a platform to get have the first steps in London. So they'll bring a little bit of a following with them, and we can build from there. So we very much are probably in the last 2 years become much more grassroots than perhaps we were before, and a much bigger focus on live music. But yeah, it's hard because you have to be distinct, you have to be different, and I think what we try to do is be very inclusive. I found certainly in Birmingham that a lot of people come to our club are, I have to say, sort of in their 30s, 40s, but also female-led, and we found that, and our management team and the team that run the Birmingham venue have been all ladies, all female for some time. It wasn't something planned, it just happened. But actually, the venue has a different feel. You've got flowers on the table, it's inclusive, and the team spend a lot of time making sure that people feel safe, particularly females, and it does bear dividends because people come because it feels like a safe space. So we've worked on that a lot this year, things like spiking kits we have, toppers.
Yeah, this was interesting. I noticed this in your bio, that you've introduced spiking training, I think it's described as.
Yeah, again, so what we focused on this year is being inclusive. So we've actually rolled out some training, if you like, to both venue staff. So it's about making people feel safe, but not just customers, but also very important to make artists feel safe. So we have a lot of female DJs playing both venues, a lot of female acts as well. So it's very important that you look after your artists, because actually if you get a band or an artist that doesn't have a good experience for whatever reason, then your reputation goes as well in the industry. So we did a lot of work on how to look after customers and artists, but yes, making people feel really safe and inclusive. And then we just hope that will see us through what is going to be a difficult time, that people that come to our venues generally love the venue, and that's I think that's a very important. If you can get that with your venue, then I think you'd like to think you're onto a winner.
You were one of the people earlier saying that the change in ticketing, basically the people aren't buying tickets up. I mean, even my live agent is telling me that bands who would sell 300 tickets, where you'd be confident of selling 300 tickets, sell a place out even before the night, is now saying you're lucky if you're at 70 tickets 7 days before the gig is happening. They will sell the night before. But that's a scare, that's a new worry to have lodged in your head, isn't it? And you can't, how's that when you're planning ahead? In a week's time, we've got this major act, but it looks like we've only got 4 tickets done.
Yeah, it is. Well, I haven't got a magic answer to this, because it's something that we've found in the last 3-4 months. I think all the venues found that once we got through Omicron kind of scare last year, there was a big, massive February, March, April, May, big, massive events that had been postponed, so we had a great time. Since then, you're right, the front advanced ticket sales have dropped off, but we found that in the last week they scale up, and then we have a lot of walk-ups, and that does give you a bit of a headache, particularly if you've booked a high-end act, a bit of a worry. So what we've done is we've monitored the ticket sales, and if it's looking like it's flagging a little bit, we'll have a bit of a boost on Facebook and all, on social media, a bit of paid adverts. But generally, they do sell last minute. Where it does give you a problem is it's difficult to forecast and plan. I guess it's just the new normal at the moment. So you just got to trust yourself that actually, if you're on a certain number of ticket sales with a week to go, you've got to be confident that you will sell. But it's an issue. It might be just a short-term issue for the next 6 months, or it might be now if it's like the new normal for the next year or two. The other way we try and work around it is then we, after the gig, we open as a club night. I'm sure everyone else does that, and you've got to cater for your local crowd, that your walk-in crowd as well. So if the gig doesn't sell, you can interact and bring in people. Generally found in our Finsbury Park venue, if you've got a band on, as long as they're half decent, we do find that people walk in, because I hear the noise, music. I shouldn't say this, but we put little speakers on the outside that you can just hear, just down the street, you can hear what's going on. So can
you hear that, Finsbury Park Council? Speakers on the outside.
But yeah, it does help, and we do switch it, we do turn it off at about 11, 12, but it just brings people in to hear a bit noise. So, but yeah, having bands and artists in does still help bring punters in, I think.
If this one works, would you do another one? Open another venue?
Yeah, so the long-term plan dream is to grow this around the country. Looking somewhere like Bristol, somewhere like that would be next, but it's hard. We need to find somewhere that's got a big student population, a lot of art community, and somewhere that's not too pricey to invest. But yeah, we'd like to spread it around the country.
And somewhere where there's a lot of Northern Soul fans.
Well, yeah, we still connect to a lot of Northern Soul fans. So the Birmingham venue, we actually opened with a sprung dance floor, so you can straight your stuff and all that sort of thing, yeah. And all fully vinyl.
Free talcum powder on the way in?
Well, we actually eventually banned talcum powder, because once it gets into your timber and everything, it makes a right mess. So it's now banned. And actually, back in the day, it wasn't used as much as people thought. It's only if you're going to do the spins. But yeah, a lot of people used to bring that powder with them.
Well, we wish you all the best. Thank you very much, Arif, everybody. North of the border next, you will find Venue 38 in Ayr. It's a former nightclub, now turned live music venue. To tell us how that happened, Tracy Ann McGregor. Hello.
Hello.
How did you end up taking over a nightclub and turning it into a live music venue on the west coast of Scotland?
Yes, on the west coast of Scotland, in a town called Ayr. Well, myself and my partner, James, who's a bass player, has been a bass player all his life, we decided to... we'd seen this venue, which was a nightclub, so we were like... really interested in music, obviously, and we thought, okay, Ayr and Ayrshire has long been known for its live music. We've a lot of, larger bands back in the 60s, 70s and 80s visited. Right. So we thought it's kind of, dropped off a little bit back from the 2000s. So we'd like to try and work out how we could bring back, like live music bands, etc. So we saw this nightclub that was up for lease. So we decided, okay, let's, throw everything in and go for it. So we finally opened, when was it? February 2020.
So this, if you don't mind me saying so, this sounds like a very foolhardy dream.
Exactly.
We're going to take all of it, we're going to plunge it all into this. You must have done some sort of research around.
We did do research. The nightclub business itself wasn't really working. I think it's been kind of falling off, anyway. So we thought, let's put our love of music into this venue and see what's going to happen. So we did a quick refurbishment because the place was in a bit of a state. There was broken floors, broken pipes, fire, doors bolted shut, etc. So we opened in the February of 2020, and then basically we got 6 weeks trade, and then we were closed down, as the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
So.
I say no, having just got up and running.
Yeah.
Having not run a venue, did you reach out to anyone who had to ask for advice, or was the advice based on your partner's experience of playing in bands, playing in venues, so knowing what sort of works and what doesn't?
We're well in the local music scene. Most of our friends have played in bands all their life, so it was a case of, everybody, we could create a space for bands to come and play at, and then look at how we could, extend that further. And not only that, what we find is touring bands, etc., they tend to kind of, when they're coming now to Scotland, they tend to kind of miss the outlying areas where there's huge catchment areas, and they tend to create or concentrate solely on, say, Glasgow and Edinburgh. And it was trying to kind of, in a way, take away the onus on those bands of just thinking the only audience we can catch going to Scotland is in those larger cities. We've got great train links, bus links, etc. We'll go up to Glasgow to hear a band, for example. It's 30 minutes away. So why can't, people from Glasgow and those bigger cities come down to us? It's the same as lots of small outlying areas in Scotland. It's trying to bring together a bigger reach for bands, for Scotland particularly.
I hadn't thought about it. Obviously,
Yeah.
you think about people commuting into the bigger place, but you don't think about going outside. To do that, though, you've got to that's where you really have to have a decent reputation, isn't it? You've got to know that this is going to be a great gig, and they book great artists.
Yeah, this is a reputation, obviously, that we're working on to build. One of the programs that we started in the venue is our Limelight Nights. So basically, that's we run it every couple of weeks on a Friday night, and we try to put on 3 original bands that do come to us from all over Scotland. All the ticket sales go to the bands, and when we refurbished during the 20 months that we were shut, we created a stage, a dressing room, a media suite as well, that we can record and film each band's performance. And we make up the recording for them, and we give it to them, once they're done, so that they can use that to then help promote themselves. Because we've created a really good sound in there, and we feel that that's, really good for these, original bands. Some of them are, just starting out 17, 18, 19 years old, and they've got really good sounds. And it's to try to, give them a chance, to be heard somewhere, and then they can use that to put out their sound elsewhere.
That's amazing. That's a very altruistic gesture, as much as anything else. What's talking about going back to the audience? Were people in Ayr excited that they were going to have a venue again, an actual live music venue?
Yeah, they are. We've got a huge catchment area within Ayr and Ayrshire of about 350,000 people. obviously, as anybody running a grassroots music venue knows, you're not going to make any money from what we're doing. So we have to substitute our other nights with some club nights, some rave bingo nights, and different kind of, to bring in obviously some money, etc. And we find that the audiences are loving the fact that they're hearing these new original bands. They're not just going out to, say, a local pub to hear cover bands, So it's given them a chance to hear a small band that's coming from Edinburgh or Dundee, Dumfries, etc., to us. So yeah, it's not easy, but it's an audience that we're building, and we've been known for what we're doing with respect to original music.
And what do you think the competition is going to be? There was some talk before we came on about venues who put on live bands versus pubs. Some people will just go to the pub because a pub will just have somebody playing an acoustic guitar or doing karaoke in it. It's completely different in terms of what you have to pay when you're running a venue.
I mean, we can't compete with local pubs. I mean, we're too big. We are an 800 capacity, so we don't put on cover bands for that reason, because we would, to pay the cover band, etc. I mean, we open just specifically for those nights. So we're not a pub where a cover band will go and play and people will come in regardless. When we put on our nights, they're coming there for that specific reason. So the rest of the time, we're closed, because we just can't compete. Because, 100 people maybe in a local pub around the corner listen to a cover band that's busy, but 100 people in our venue, it's empty.
With bands who are travelling a bit, I imagine we'll come back to this if we can just before the end. But are you noticing their demands are increasing? Because obviously petrol's going up and everything else is going up, that the artist is now, everyone is squeezed down the line, aren't they? So where are the pinch points, I suppose?
This is obviously a worry for the future. We've got a few we would regard as bigger bands coming, like Space Band is coming in March. We did have Reef coming, but then they cancelled because they just said they can't, or for this year anyway, their budget doesn't allow them to come up to Scotland as a whole. So this is something that will, probably will impact going forward, and we just have to hope that eventually, this will resolve itself.
Yeah. Ambitions. What would you like?
Ambitions to grow, obviously, the venue, become a focal point for original bands, and try to work on bringing, say, larger kind of touring bands to it, because we've provided everything that they need. A band can basically come into us and just plug and play, so to speak. So it's putting Ayr and the west coast of Scotland on the touring map, and getting bands to understand that there is a huge audience in those small outlying areas, and they don't just have to concentrate on, say, Glasgow and Edinburgh.
Yes, that is a very good ambition. Tracy Ann McGregor, please, everyone. Right, from the west coast of Scotland down further to the West Country for our next story. Belfast-born, has lived in Bristol for 16 years, worked in homelessness before launching a new venue with a group of 3 friends. Please welcome from Strange Brew in Bristol, Kerry Patterson. I had a definite whoo, fan clubs in. Strange Brew is another of our newer venues. Tell us a little bit about it. Because were you in music before you became involved with the venue?
Yeah, a little bit. Myself and the 3 other people that run it, we were doing club nights in Bristol for about 10 years. That was the extent of our involvement. And then we desperately wanted to open a venue because there was a lack of venues in Bristol. A lot had closed. And we did a crowdfunder to raise money so we could open a venue because the building was derelict.
You did a crowdfunder.
Yes, we did a crowdfunder.
How much did you, to take over the lease, or?
It was basically for the building work, because the building that we took on was derelict for 10 years, so it needed a lot of work.
And how much, do you mind me asking, how much did you have to fund to, how much did people put in?
Well, we raised 53,000.
Wow.
And 1,100 people contributed, so I think we had that energy behind us before we even opened, which has massively helped us.
And you mentioned, so you're moving into a city and taking over a venue just as other venues are closing. Why are they closing? What's the landscape that you're opening into then? If other venues are going out of business or having to shut because of complaints or poor council decisions, what was?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know the reason for all the places closing, but I think predominantly it was gentrification, places being bought by developers or being closed due to noise complaints. So that was the backdrop against which we were trying to open somewhere. But then we didn't foresee that we were going to open during a pandemic. No. So we don't know what normal is.
Right, yeah, cool.
And there is no normal now, so.
What were the first hurdles, though, you had to get over once you'd obviously patched the building up?
Well, the first hurdle was that we weren't entitled to any government funding during COVID because we weren't officially open when it hit. So we couldn't really properly open until May last year, so we're still very young.
Right.
Yeah.
And how, when it comes to, I haven't mentioned this before, just I imagine within a music community there's always people to staff the place, but do you, when you start up a venue, I suppose in my own head I'd be thinking, where do you find a good, sound engineer? Where do you find someone who knows or can, rewire the lights?
Well, I think we were lucky because we were already part of the music scene in Bristol, and we had an amazing sound engineer that we used for the events we used to put on, who is a D&B specialist. Notice they've got that in here. And because there were so many people involved in the crowdfunder, lots of people put themselves forward to be involved. People wanted to be part of it.
Yes, yeah.
So that community was already there.
So you start up, how do you publicise the fact that you've launched a new venue? And how have you found that trying to advertise gigs has changed?
So we had the pre-existing community from when we ran events in Bristol, and then that kind of grew through the crowdfunder when people got to know that we were opening a venue. But we have noticed that now that Facebook is essentially, dead as a way of promoting events, we're just stuck with Instagram, and it's extremely...
Hang on a second. Facebook is dead when it comes to publicising events. Is that a thing?
Well, I mean, people
I don't have to publicise events, so I don't know. Is Facebook, are we finding that? Facebook less powerful as a gone?
Yeah, I think they restricted how you can advertise events through Facebook, so it's made it very difficult to get reach.
Right.
I hate that term, but yeah.
So what do you do? Then?
I mean, we're kind of stuck with Instagram, but it's, I don't know if anyone else finds this, but the more money we spend on advertising on Instagram, the more they make you spend to get the same reach. And we've just had enough of it because it's time consuming and it's not the same as Facebook. On Facebook, you could say you were attending an event and other people would see that you were attending an event and you'd get a bit of community chat on the event. Instagram is just people liking a picture. It doesn't mean they're going to go to your event. So it doesn't translate to attendance or ticket buying. We do have a monthly newsletter, so we do that. Traditional postering, some advertising in local press, but yeah, I think advertising is a big difficulty. I'd be interested to know what other people are finding and what is working for other people.
Let me make a note of that. Advertising's broken. I suppose that makes it even more important that once you get somebody over the door, then you've got to hit them then with, please come over the door again, please come back. These are the things we're doing. We're going to give you an amazing evening. Come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, the most important thing that you can get is word of mouth recommendations, if people are telling their friends. But I'm not sure that kind of happens in quite the same way anymore. Yeah. Just an example, I think the most popular event that we do is a Monday night live jam. Every single Monday night, it's like a queue out the door, one in, one out, and that has just developed through...
A live jam?
Yeah, so there's like a house band, and then any musician can turn up and play or sing, and it's just massively popular. Really? And that's just grown from word of mouth. Yeah. So...
Well, there's a lot of egos there, I can imagine. That's a muso's dream, isn't it? But it's my absolute nightmare. I hate the J word. A whole evening of people jamming. Can you think of anything worse?
The staff are not the biggest fans of it. So there were some regulars, but you also get people who've never played on a stage before. It's an amazing opportunity to actually perform in a live venue.
So what else can you do? Are you thinking of doing other things? So obviously the live jam is I take the piss. It's a great idea. This comes from the man who did a live punk rock karaoke band, so I really can't take the piss out of a live jam. Doing that, and what else then can you do in the spirit of building what you want to do, which is build a community?
So I think a lot of people have said this already, but obviously trying to be diverse and open-minded in your scope, broadening your audience, broadening your church, so to speak. Because I noticed that this place is not just a church for worship, but they host other events, so it's that kind of idea. And looking at different types of communities that you can host and offer space to, because there's lots of people that need space. But also thinking of ways that are a low cost to us as a venue that can bring us money in that we can then use to substitute events that we want to put on. So like corporate hire, which I was always against before, but actually it's a way to bring in money, and film hire. That then allows us to fund things that do build community.
Is there much corporate hire?
We've been surprised.
Really?
That we are getting some interest.
I mean, that's the only upside of the gentrification. If you've got some corporates coming in, they can give you some of the money back.
Well, exactly.
The loaded tossers.
Yeah, I mean, it's one way to kind of help fund the things that we do want to do.
I won't say which venue it is. 1 year on Independent Venue Week tour, I got chatting to the guy who ran a venue on the south coast, and he was saying even then, and this would have been 2017, 18, somewhere around there, he was saying there are months where he would get to the 29th of the month and he hadn't covered his bills, and that's when you start worrying. A great month was he'd covered all his bills by the 23rd of the month, and he'd just be able to put his feet up and have a tremendous week. Mm-hmm. How tight is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly tight, and I think, for us, because we opened only properly last year during a pandemic, it's hard for us to know what is normal anymore, and there's a lot of anxiety about our energy bills going up. And how do we keep delivering the things we've been delivering for the same price without putting up beer prices or ticket prices when customers can't afford it? Yeah. So yes, it's worrying, and that's why it's about looking at other ways to bring in income so we can keep doing what we're doing. We don't want to have to pass on that cost to customers because they're already not going out so much. I think that's starting to happen. But yeah, I think just in terms of building community, that is the most important thing, and trying to find ways to, like, you know, as an industry, music venues are vital, but how do we get that across, that we are vital and essential? Because if we're not seen as essential, then people will stop using us. And it would be nice if we had sort of the cultural recognition that, you know, galleries and concert halls get, because that would protect us.
I still go back to my idea that any band who's toured or benefited from playing grassroots venues, if they play Wembley Arena, have to give a quid from their ticket price back into a fund, which goes back into paying for where they came from. Make it 2 quid. So thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you, Kerry. We're excellent. Our final guest, and this is sort of a theme, really, in a way, to some of the venues, in that it is a music venue, but it does other things as well. We're off to the Wirral next. Craig Pennington is founder and director of Future Yard in Birkenhead, a venue which, and I quote, reimagines a community music venue as a space for dynamic social change, providing skills and training opportunities for young people. Ladies and gentlemen, Craig Pennington. Your background's interesting as well, isn't it? How many things, what have you not done? Shall I just list some of the things you have done? Started a music magazine, which became very influential, didn't you? Involved in, what was it called? Bedo Lido. That's the one. Yeah. Did that. You helped found what's that big festival? Liverpool International Festival of Psychedelia?
Certainly didn't help. It was our festival. Yeah, doing us down there. Yeah, we started Liverpool Psych Fest a few years back.
And you're also a member of the Liverpool City Region Music Board, which, I know it's a daft question, but what's that?
So it's run underneath our Metro Mayor, Steve Rotherham. So it's a board that represents the needs and the interests and the opportunities of the music sector in Liverpool, Liverpool City Region. Despite the fact that Liverpool, you know, has done a few things with music over the years, it was never really viewed as like a viable sector. You know, a sector that needed to be kind of understood and kind of celebrated in the same way as any other sector. So that board was something that we were part of setting up, and it's been really useful.
So what changed and how to get the board set up and for people to start taking notice of it?
Political attitudes, understanding of what our sector is, the jobs it creates, the economic impact it has, the real kind of deep, kind of meaningful, kind of profound change that it brings about in places. And yeah, I mean, that board, you know, tangibly brought just over £2 million worth of investment into the music sector in the Liverpool City region, distributed £250,000 worth of very, very immediate support during COVID. So really? it's been a really, you know, tangible benefit, I think, for music being made in our part of the world.
Just before we go to the next point, so Liverpool, you would say, is quite a supportive council these days. Do you think that's a bit of a loaded question, I suppose.
I think I'd say that Liverpool City Region completely gets it.
Right.
Wirral Borough Council, you mentioned before, so we're on the Wirral. For people who don't know, Birkenhead's basically Brooklyn compared to Liverpool.
Yeah,
I'll leave it there.
Yeah, okay.
So we're really close, but it's a different Borough Council.
Just out of interest, supportive versus unsupportive councils. Who would say their venue is in an area with a supportive council? Show of hands. And who unsupportive? Generally. Yes, that's interesting. So obviously, the region board gives you money and stuff. Does it also give you any other help in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, good local authorities will create an environment and a context in which music venues and music communities and cultures can thrive. I mean, I think, you know, we start with every single time we go into the venue every day, we start with a basic underpinning principle that we all believe profoundly that music can change the world. That's why we get up in the morning. That's why we do our job. That's why we put bands on the stage, and that's why we do what we do. And I think if you think about a live music venue as a real kind of transformational opportunity for a place to change what a place means in the world. Like, who in this room knows what Birkenhead is, what it means? Like, if someone says Birkenhead to you, what would that, conjure up? What's that sense of place and perspective? And I think music's powerful because it can change that frame. It can really, really give a meaning for a place nationally, internationally, but also in terms of the opportunities that as a grassroots music venue you can provide for local young people. So our whole idea with Future Yard is you think about the venue as a transformational opportunity. Think about everything that you do, every node and function that your organisation plays, open that out and provide that as a pathway and a training opportunity for a local young person. We're in a part of the world which is like bottom 0.3% in terms of indices of multiple deprivation, very, very challenging, a lot of poverty. If we can provide a pathway into a career within this amazing sector for those local young people within a buzzing, vibrant, really, really high quality, well-curated live music venue, then that's when real meaningful change can actually happen.
How do you facilitate that then? Do you just give them chances to do sound? Do you give them, or do they have to start off as a roadie and build their way up? What do you do to?
So we built a program. It's called Soundcheck. We actually started our Soundcheck program. There's a few kind of kindred spirits here that open venues during COVID. But we run a program. Originally we did it ourselves with a little bit of support through youth music, but now we work in partnership with a local education provider. Essentially really, really easy to access. It's completely free. You don't have to pay for it. It's directly targeted at vulnerable local young people. And it's a structured training program that uses the skills of our in-house team to teach those young people how to rig up the lights for a show, how to run the basic sound on a desk, how to event manage a gig. They'll do that over 12 weeks worth of sessions. They do loads of practical work-based learning. And then by the end of that, they can either, come and work with us, or they can go out into the industry and they can work at other venues. 80% of our delivery team in the venues, that's engineers, techs, and event managers, have come through that training program. Really? So I think there was a question before to one of the other panelists around, where do you find engineers? Well, you train them. Yeah. You go out into a part of the world that needs that, and you train them.
And how do you fund that course? Where does that come from?
So now we've done a really small partnership with a local HE college, and then basically they can draw down the Department for Education money to subsidise those places, and then we collaborate and work on delivering that in our space. So it's Department for Education money in partnership with the college.
I know you're constantly looking at the venue thinking, what else could we do in here? What other possibilities? Where else in the community can we use this for?
Absolutely, 100%. Whether that's with the live programming or our skills and training, or that's with our artist-facing offer. So we've got a program called Propeller, which essentially is an artist incubator. So that's about kind of working with emerging new talented artists and giving them the wraparound, full holistic kind of support that they need to develop sustainable careers within the modern within the modern music industry. So that program is something we run. We've got 5 rehearsal studios in our basement, as well as the live venue. And then also underpinning everything that we do is making sure that opportunity is there and targeted to the people within our community that need it the most. And that's what we endeavour to do, and create really robust ways of working with local housing associations, charities, different ways that we can make sure that we're reaching people locally, so that they're the people who are enjoying the benefit of what we're doing with the venue.
Excellent. Just one last question, because I noticed we're running short of time. How long, when you opened up, I don't know who was in charge of booking the bands, but how long did it take to convince agents or outside promoters or whoever to use your venue or to book their artists into a brand new venue in Birkenhead?
Yeah,
does it take a while? When you first phone up, it's Future Yard in Birkenhead.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a kind of a geography education thing that has to go on, especially with some London-centric agents, and I don't blame them for that.
Like air.
Yeah, completely. I mean, and we have had some agents who like, oh yeah, we're going to do a show in Liverpool, and then we'll come and do one at your place. It's like, well, that's kind of like playing next door, so it doesn't really work. But do you know what? Like, I think agents want their artists to play in really, really well-run, well-programmed, well-curated, great technical specifications, people that love it and want to be there, and want to be part of something kind of like exciting and essential, which has got a bigger meaning in the world. So the agents that we work with, keep working with, have been great, to be fair.
Craig Pennington, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anything anyone on the panel wants to pick up on? I do think something, coming back to what we were talking about just before coming on, and something which Nathan mentioned earlier on, is really important, is explaining where the money goes. Do we think that just being able to explain to, well, audiences and everyone else, and when you're having conversations with agents, you were saying, Nathan, that there are lots of hidden costs that you have to pay that no one thinks about.
I think there's a massive education of the economy of running a music venue, but the economy of everything within it that needs to happen, and it is just a crunch that, even down to the simple ticket price that we explained, and many of us in this room know that already, but a £10 ticket price comes down to £6 somewhat before you start paying an artist or anything else. When you take off VAT and PRS, then what do you pay people? And then when we're talking about what's on the higher rate card cost, whatever you want to call it, that someone comes and pays you, and they, a lot of, whether it be a promoter or whatever else in the costing, they want it at the base price because they're being squeezed. And the talk that we had was the pie is there, but it's just not big enough for everybody. So how can we work, and I think there's an understanding from also within a lot of venues themselves about the economics of what is real, because sometimes there is a value in a venue turning round and not being a race to the bottom for being the cheapest hire, to encourage people into their venue to actually value the person that's doing the sound, the bar staff, and putting a value in the whole thing, to saying, like, we need to essentially be paid. And like we said, who pays for the microphone that gets dropped that isn't on a costing sheet to somebody? Who pays for a cable? So there's all that side of it that needs to come out as well.
We do tell customers, if a customer's moaning about the price of a pint, I will just give them a lecture about the electricity bill.
You see, that sounds so out of character.
It really does work, and they'll choose the more expensive pint, and they'll understand, and they'll go and explain it to their mate. But I'm sick of people comparing the cost of a pint and moaning about the cost of a pint, but not moaning about the cost of petrol. I know they're moaning now, but they don't moan about the cost of McDonald's, and I'll bring that up. It's like, you're not complaining about the big corporations and the price increases there. You're always going for the small hanging fruit like pubs. Yeah. And then talk about supermarkets. And if I ever catch customers bringing their own alcohol in, I give them a massive lecture about how, the supermarkets don't really pay taxes or beer duty. Supermarkets got a massive break over lockdown. The food banks, I work in a lot of food banks. The supermarkets are donating food to the food banks and are getting a tax break. So, there's big businesses that really should be attacked a bit more than we are as pubs and music venues for the price of a pint.
I'm just going to expand on that one bit, because I think that there's a bit of an echo chamber that we sit in ourselves and doing this here. And one of the challenges that I know Mark faces it and everyone else faces it, but it is taking our value and argument and credibility and getting it into a wider political sphere outside of us talking to each other about it. Yeah. It is getting those voices in political influence to value who we are, what we do, and exactly how much influence and the cultural identity that we give as a bedrock of cultural infrastructure in the UK. I think that is what needs to be understood, and that's where the conversations need to be taken next outside of our sphere. But going back to it, we also need to educate to the wider public and agents and managers and artists themselves about what it takes to put on a show and make it happen, and not just make it happen, but make it happen really well.
I think that's a great place to finish, don't you, everybody? Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for all our panelists.